Okay. All right. Well, I have posted a bunch of stuff to Brew and Learn. You should have received an invitation to CampusWire to join, and so please use that. Accept the invitation and join CampusWire. Some of you may already have a CampusWire account, and you might have. If you created your CampusWire account with a different email than what's on the roster, then either you have to create a second account with the email that's on the roster, or you can come to office hours either on Zoom or in person. This week I only have Zoom office hours, and I can add you to CampusWire. You should have also received an invitation to Data Camp. Again, I use the emails that appear on the roster, and so you have to accept the Data Camp invitation with the email account that's on the roster. And I don't have extra invitations to give out and stuff, so you really have to accept it using the thing. They give you access to their premium product, which is it's actually costs a good chunk of money. So and you get 6 months of access. So even after the quarter ends, you'll have an additional kind of 3 months to kind of use it during the summer if you want. It's a great resource if you kind of want like a little bit of extra training and a little bit of extra learning and things like that. So so that's what we have. I've posted kind of the first weeks of homework. So there's just 3 chapters I want you to complete. They're very kind of basic chapters. And you can go through the rest of the courses are generally 4 to 5 chapters long, and you can go through the rest of the chapters in the course, not necessarily for this class, but just kind of for your own benefit and learning. And they give you a little certificate of completion and stuff like that if that interests you. But basically, I will use Data Camp to kind of assign some basic learning, and you need that. So if for whatever reason it's not working for you in Data Camp, again, just check, when you look at your email, look at what email that the invitation was sent to, and you have to create your account using that particular email address. Okay? Your first homework assignment has been posted. Homeworks get posted as these RMD files, R Markdown files, and basically you can enter your responses into that thing, and then in R Markdown you use this button called knit, or basically it renders the output into a PDF, and you will upload your PDF to Brew and Learn. Part of your Data Camp homework this week is to learn how to use R Markdown. Okay, just getting started with R Markdown is one of the chapters assigned, and so hopefully that will give you a sense of how to use it. And we'll you have your TAs, and you can come to office hours if you're facing any kind of trouble. I've posted a little guide on how to kind of download and install R, and I think someone said they have a Mac, and so my instructions did not apply. If you're having trouble with any of this stuff, stop by my Zoom office hours. I can help you there. What you need to do is you need to download and install R first. Once you have that, then you will download and install R Studio. And so I think this link will take you here, and it kind of tells you first install R, and then once you do that, install R Studio. And so you'll kind of click download and install R. And basically, I think for the Mac OS, you download the package that applies to your chip. So some of you have an Intel chip, some of you have like a Apple Silicon M1 or even an M2 chip these days. And I think when you open the package, you will see the icon, and basically you just drag it over to the folder that says applications. But I can show you how to do that if that's an issue. I just I'm using a PC, but I'm mostly familiar with the Apple operating system as well. But anyway, once you've installed R, you will also download and install R Studio. I think this thing automatically detects your system. but you can kind of download the appropriate folders for your appropriate system and things like that. Okay, and then the other thing you'll also need to install is a LaTeX distribution. Some of you may already have LaTeX on your machines. LaTeX is this typesetting engine that basically takes your documents and makes them nice, pretty PDF outputs. And I recorded a little video on how to do that for using one particular distribution called TinyTeX. I know it looks like LaTeX, but they pronounce it tech. Okay, so TinyTeX versus there's also MacTeX and MikeTeX. There's all kinds of different things for whether you have Windows or Mac or things like that. Again, if you're struggling with any of this stuff, don't hesitate to talk to your TA. Don't hesitate to come see me during office hours. But anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at today's lecture. And we are going to look at some data visualization concepts. Okay, so data visualization, we're going to start, I guess, our introductory to data science with data visualization. Data visualization is a way for us to present our data in a visual medium. Okay, a lot of this stuff comes from our textbook, so make sure you keep up with the reading. So we're looking at chapter 2. You can kind of skim over chapter 1, but chapter 2 has some good stuff, and so yeah, please make sure you keep up with your reading. Okay. Here a quote says, "Data graphics provide one of the most accessible, compelling, and expressive modes to investigate and depict patterns in the data." And yeah, let me just show you an example here. Okay, so here is a small table of data. I just went on a dealership website last night, and I looked up used Volkswagen Jettas, and I downloaded a few bits of information. I looked at the mileage of the vehicle, the price on the vehicle, its trim line, and what year was the vehicle. So we have these 2019, 2020 used Volkswagen Jettas. They have different mileages, they have different prices, and there's like the S and the R line and the SE, different kind of levels of how nice or whatever the vehicle is, and this is the information. Now, is there any particular vehicle here, looking at these numbers, is there any particular vehicle here that stands out to you as having an unusually high or low price, or unusually high or low mileage or something? And basically the point is it's hard to detect unusual data points when the data is presented as numbers here. Okay, and we understand numbers, and it's actually not, it's rather miraculous, this whole concept of language and reading and all of this, right? Your eyes are looking at little squiggles on the screen here, and it goes into your brain, right? You see this 1, 9, 2, 4, 5, these scribbles in these shapes, and your brain understands this as a 1, 9, 2, 4, 5, and your brain says, okay, that's 19,245, and we have this concept of a number. We see this thing 21500. We understand that's a price. And anyway, this uses a certain part of our brain, and we say, okay, this is the data that exists. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a scatter plot. Okay. I'm going to put mileage on the x-axis, price on the y-axis, and we're going to just kind of plot these things. And here's kind of a command that I use. We're going to introduce this. We'll get into how do we use ggplot on Friday. But basically, this is the command. I'd say, make a scatter plot, and this is the plot that gets created. Okay. And now, what do we see? We see there is a point that kind of stands out, right? We are able to establish there's an overall pattern that as the mileage goes up, the price goes down. There's kind of this very strong relationship that as more miles have been driven on the vehicle, the value of that vehicle goes down and down. But we see this one observation here that really stands out as being kind of far apart. It doesn't quite fit the rest of the pattern, right? The rest of these things kind of follow this almost a very straight line pattern of like more mileage driven, the price is going down. And here's this one vehicle that has relatively a high number of mileage, but also relatively high price here, okay? And this is basically the power of data visualization. When we visualize our data, it uses different parts of our brain, okay? Here I've colored them based on the year, 2019 versus 2020. 2019s are in red and 2020 are in blue. Here I can color them based on the trim line, okay? And we see, oh, you know what? Most of these data points are green, S being the S trim line, okay? We have a few SE trim line, and this is our R line. The R line is kind of the, I guess, the sporty, racier version of the thing. And you know, when we look at just the numbers directly, it's difficult, right? Like if we studied them hard, we might have been like, oh yeah, that's kind of high, right? This is the same information here as it is over here, okay? Exact same information. It's just when we create a visual pattern, our eyes and our brains are really able to kind of detect patterns visually, you know, in a way that our brains have a difficult, in a way that's different from being able to detect patterns when they're just numbers, okay? It's the same information, but depending on how it's presented, our brains are able to pick up different kind of things. And that's the power of data visualization, is that we can kind of jump over this idea of, okay, now I have to think about these numbers, okay? Instead, we can access kind of this visual part of our brain that says, oh yeah, you know what? These dots, they look like they're in a straight line, right? You know, you look at the sky, you identify, you know, you notice things in the clouds, you notice things in the stars, and well, you don't really see stars in LA, but you know, we're able to access the visual part of our brain, and that helps us identify patterns, okay? And so data visualization is really important in that it helps us identify and find things that stand out, identify and patterns and things like that in a way that just looking at the numbers themselves directly are not able to do, okay? And so that's we're going to start off with data visualization. And, you know, ultimately our goal is by the end of this course, I want you to have the skills to be able to create compelling graphics, okay? And so anybody can kind of make a data graphic, and it kind of takes mastery and knowledge and insight to be able to make good and compelling graphics. And I say data graphic is compelling if the viewer receives whatever message it is that you are trying to communicate, okay? So when you create the graphic, there's a message you want to send to the viewer. Now, if you don't know what that message is, you can't create a compelling graphic, right? You can just kind of say, hey, here's our data. But oftentimes there's a message, right? And so the message that you might want to communicate could be something like, I just want to show a general trend that as your X value goes up, the Y value also goes up. Or, you know, I want to show this general trend that as you know, mileage goes up, the price of the vehicle goes down, right? And we can kind of create a graphic that shows that general trend. Or perhaps we want to have the graphic show a difference between groups, and we can say, hey, these are the 2019 vehicles, these are the 2020 vehicles, or this is what one particular age group, this is how they cast their votes, this is a different age group, and this is how they cast their votes, or whatever, things like that. Or you might want to, maybe the story you want to tell is just this one unusual data point, right? Kind of like in the cars, we said, hey, here's this one car that is just priced very different from the rest. Look at this. This is the one unusual data point. Maybe that's the story you want to tell. And so you want to think about what is it that you're trying to communicate to the viewer, and that's what you do. Now, that's kind of you can kind of think of data visualization. There's kind of two stages, right? So one is I guess our ultimate goal is to create a compelling graphic, okay? But before we can even do that, we often have to look at what kind of story even exists in the data. And so one a major aspect of data visualization is just to explore the data, right? And so before you even want to tell some kind of story, communicate some kind of message, and get that to the reader, maybe you just want to explore the data. And data visualizations allow us to explore the data as well. And so, in your final project, a lot of what you're going to do is going to be exploring the data. And then eventually, after you explore the data, you want to present, your findings, okay? And so, your final report will consist of some graphics during the exploration phase, and then really you'll kind of identify the things that you want to communicate and tell at the end. But graphics are just a great tool for us to kind of explore and see what even exists in the data, what kind of stories even exist in the data in the first place. All right, let me go ahead and give you your first view quiz answer for this week. Our first view quiz answer is the letter A. A as in apple. A as in apple is our first view quiz answer for today. So jot that down and make sure you respond to the view quiz. Okay, the textbook in Chapter 2 goes through some examples of data visualizations and data graphics, and they kind of try to tell us a little bit of a story here. We'll explore a little bit. So I won't have time to kind of cover everything that's in Chapter 2. So please, again, make sure you do your reading in the textbook here. Okay. A lot of the stuff that is produced in the textbook, they kind of share the source code as well on GitHub, and so you can take a look at that. But they explore some information from the 2012 federal election cycle. So I don't know, you guys were like 10 or something in 2012. I don't know how old you were, but during that election, Obama was running for re-election, okay, and the Republican challenger was Mitt Romney, okay, and there were also kind of races for the House of Representatives and the Senate, and there were political action committees. There's also the Federal Election Commission that kind of keeps track of all of these financial donations and things like that. Okay, and admittedly, the political landscape has changed quite a bit from 2012, but it's still interesting to kind of explore this data. Okay, what I'm skipping over is a lot of work that was required to kind of compile the data. The data comes from the FEC, but there was a lot of kind of work that needed to be done to kind of combine it. We're kind of skipping over all of that. We're going to just dive into the data visualization. But a big aspect of data science is also just like cleaning up your data so you can start working with it. Okay, and kind of we're going to just start off with this overall question of exploration, which is how much money did each candidate raise? But this is a hard question. It's a little bit convoluted because of kind of campaign finance rules, and so you can donate directly to a candidate's kind of campaign fund, but you can also, but there's rules about how much an individual can donate, but there's also these kind of political action committees, and if you're a very wealthy individual, you can donate a lot of money to kind of a political action committee, and you don't have the same kind of rules and restrictions for donations to an individual candidate and things like that. And are you a corporation? And there's all kinds of stuff. And when you have money, okay, whether you're a political action committee or a candidate, you can use that money to promote yourself, or you can use that money to run negative ads against your opponent and things like that. Okay, and so perhaps a better question is how much money was spent on each candidate, and we're going to just kind of look at some of the top top candidates where lots of money were spent. At least $10 million were spent. And we see we have Mitt Romney, Barack Obama, and then there's others: Tommy Thompson, Richard Murdoch, Josh Mandel, Tim Kaine, George Allen. I don't know if any of those names sound familiar. And you can kind of look up the 2012 election for each of these things, and they basically, a lot of these were kind of Senate elections. Those are kind of seen as higher stakes political elections other than the president and things like that. Basically, the most amount of money was spent on Obama and Romney, and they were basically running for president. And if we look at this, look at all of this money spent on Obama, 200 something million, over 250 million, Romney over 100 million. Does that mean Obama raised the most money? And well, we want to say, and the answer is not necessarily, because what we want to do is, the way the data is kept is you can spend money supporting a candidate or running negative ads against a candidate. So not just the total money, but we want to say, okay, is the money supporting or anti? Okay, and if you look at this, what do we see? Okay, there was actually a lot of money spent on Obama, but it was like vast majority was negative ads against Obama. Okay. And actually, for Romney, the majority was also negative, but not as much, right? Yeah. So this is like this tells a very different story from over here, right? We're like, oh, lots of money was spent on Obama, and if you're not, I don't know where you live, but if you live in California, we are largely isolated from presidential political ads because they say, there's kind of, California generally votes a certain way every single presidential election. So they say, why even bother? If you live in, say, Ohio or Florida or these swing states, I guess Nevada and even Arizona is a swing state these days and stuff, you get like bombarded with a crazy amount of ads. If you ever travel and stay in a hotel, you're just like, oh my gosh, this TV is crazy here. But this is what you see. You see a lot of kind of negative ads against candidates and things like that. And so, when we do this, we see for Romney around 70% was negative advertising, and then about 92% of Obama's the campaign spending spent on Obama was actually 92% of it was negative, right? And so that reveals some important insight into some of this stuff. Okay, so let's explore the data a little bit further, and we can just kind of ask this question about Republicans versus Democrats. Did Republicans spend more money than Democrats during the election? And we can kind of just look at, just in general, let's look at the total spending, either supporting or going against. And we will kind of go under the assumption that if there was money spent supporting a Democrat, it was by Democrats. And if there was money against Democrats, we're going to assume that it came from Republicans, and then vice versa. If there's money going against Republicans, we're going to assume it's coming from Democrats, and if it's money supporting Republicans, we're going to assume it's coming from Republicans. And so this is what we see across the bottom. We have this column is for Democrats, this column is for Republicans. There's a few other parties that much less spending. And so we see, the money going against Democrats is quite a bit high, and the money supporting Republicans is larger. And so kind of this total spending by Republicans was more than the total spending by Democrats in the 2012 election. And so this is kind of some of this summary there, right? There's more money spent supporting Republican candidates than there was money spent supporting Democratic candidates. So just looking at the kind of the supporting colors here. And then if you look at the anti, okay, there was more money spent against Democrats over here than there was against Republicans over there. And very, very little money in the some of these other parties here, okay? What we can do further as we explore our data is we could say, okay, what if we split it, not just, so this is like all the races, all the kind of House races, all the Senate races, and the president. If we split this up, across the top, this is money for House races. This is money for the presidential race. This is money for the Senate, okay? And what we see is that kind of the money spent on the presidential race kind of dwarfs everything else, right? There was a lot of money going against the Democratic presidential candidate, going against Obama, okay? There was a lot of money. If you look at kind of the House races, the difference isn't as dramatic. So negative money against Democrats actually isn't that much higher. And there's actually, I think if you look at this bar versus this red portion of the bar, maybe there's actually a little bit more money going anti-Republicans, but these are very similar in size. We see there's more pro-Republican money for House races than Democratic races, and for the Senate, it's there's actually more anti money going against the Republican Senate races and stuff like that. So this actually kind of gives us a little bit more insight than this as well, right? And so as far as we're kind of exploring the data, this is a good kind of theme and idea that you will encounter is you say, okay, what is the kind of pattern that we're seeing here? Maybe there is a pattern or maybe not. And does this pattern also hold true if I further divide my data into different groups, right? So here we're saying, okay, let's look at, Republicans versus Democrat spending over here. Let's further split that up based on whether it was a House race, presidential race, or Senate race, okay? And so this is kind of this political stuff. But, whatever data set you decide to look at, there's probably interesting little subgroups to explore. So, for group projects, a group that did an interesting thing was they were looking at kind of like how much does it cost to rent an apartment, okay? And there's all kinds of things that go into the cost of an apartment. One is like the size of the apartment and how many bedrooms it has, right? That's a big thing. Also, which neighborhood is it in? Okay, is it, like how close are you to campus, or things like that. And they kind of tried to split it out and said, all right, let's look at compare not just square footage, but let's look at like 2-bedroom apartments, and there's bigger 2-bedroom apartments and smaller 2-bedroom apartments. Let's look at 1-bedroom apartments, and you can kind of split it up into these different subgroups. And there's kind of there's general trends, and then there's also kind of interesting trends and findings as well. How important are certain amenities to the thing? Does the apartment come with a refrigerator or not, or do you have to buy your own refrigerator, bring your own refrigerator, which depending on where you're going, that can make a difference here. Okay, so here are just some summary points regarding that particular plot there. Let me give you your second view quiz answer. Second view quiz answer is the letter B. B as in bear. B as in bear. Is their second view quiz answer. Okay. There's kind of there's a few different kind of stories we hear. And sometimes, one of the stories you hear about campaign donations is, for certain candidates, it's just a few very rich people that support this candidate. And then for other candidates, it's like a whole bunch of, there's grassroots movement, and it's a whole bunch of small donations coming from a whole bunch of different people, right? And I think we can imagine, or I don't know if you've ever paid attention to the politics, but some candidates, kind of make a big point of, the average donation to my campaign is $25. It's mostly just a bunch of small donations and things like that, and so there's kind of that this storyline has existed for many years, and so do we see any kind of pattern here? Okay, is it so this was a storyline, was did Romney just have support from a few very rich Republican donors, or did Obama have support from across the economic spectrum and things like that? And so, one thing we can do is we could say, okay, well, how many donations were made and what was the size of the donation? Okay. And in both of these things, we get this we call these hockey stick graphs, but basically you have one column that's like way dominant. And I don't know if you're familiar with reading scientific notation. 6E05 means 6 followed by 5 zeros, so 600,000, okay? And so we're seeing this first column around 0 means, 0 to however much money. There's close to 600,000 donations of that. Romney had around 300-something thousand donations, okay? And as the monies go higher, right, $75,000 donation, okay, there's a few. This graphic is kind of useless. It's hard to kind of make any sense of it, just because the scaling on this thing, right? If this is 0 and this is 25,000, this line right here would represent like 12,000. I don't know if you can see there's like a very kind of halfway between this line and this line is 12,000. I don't think any of us can even imagine giving $12,000 to a candidate's thing, right? That's like multiple months of rent, and the idea of like giving that to a campaign seems like you could buy a used car for that, right? So that's like that's over that, and even like halfway here is like $6,000, and that's still, you might as well say $1 million, because there's no way I'm giving $6,000 to any political candidate, even if I super love whoever. And so these, just the width of these bins is just too big for us to kind of make any kind of amounts. And so both candidates have very large donations and smaller amounts, basically under like $2,000, which is still a lot, right? And I really, if you talk to a college student who's given money to a campaign, it's probably like something between $5 and $100, and you say, I gave $100 to this campaign, you're like, wow, you really love this candidate, right? And that's like barely shows up on our tick mark, right? So the kind of so what do we do in cases like that? Well, one thing you can do is you can change to a logarithm scale, okay? So when you take logs, going from $1 to $10 is the same difference as going from $10 to $100, and that's the same difference as going from $10 or $100 to $1,000. So the distances are multiplicative, okay? So this is 1. This is 10. This halfway over here is 100. This is 1,000. This would be 10,000. This would be 100,000. So the tick marks become multiplicative, and so this being $100. So we see a lot of kind of donations around, I don't know, 100, somewhere between 100 and 1,000. This, I'm guessing, is around $200. Okay, and this is probably 500, or I don't know. Okay. 200, 500, and 1,000, or something like that, okay? And so this is kind of what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of kind of $200 donations, maybe a lot of $500 donations, a lot of $1,000 donations. These are kind of my guesses. And this graphic is called a density plot, and this kind of you get this, it's kind of like a histogram, but you draw kind of like a smoothed out curve. You also see kind of bumps here. This would be a bump at $100, and these are probably bumps at like $50, $40, $30, $20 types of things. These tiny little ridges here, $10 donations, $20 donations, 30, $40, $50, $100 donation type things. And what we see here's kind of I think this is around $2,000, okay, right here. And we see Romney had a lot more $2,000 donations, and then Obama had $2,000 donations. And does that mean anything? I don't know, but but this is what we have. And both of them had very few donations, over $10,000. But yeah, there is definitely a different shape where Obama does have much greater support at maybe around the $200 location than Romney did. And so what we changed here was we made the x-axis a log scale, and that kind of allows us to kind of make a little bit more sense when you have distributions that are very kind of skewed, where you have these really large things, okay? We can kind of further split based on kind of different phases of the election. So there's like the general election and during the primary. And so, when in 2012, there was no real primary. Nobody was like running against Obama during the primary season. But, there were several candidates during the primary season for Republican candidates that people were trying to vie for, who would be the Republican candidate. And what we see is actually during the general election, the distributions are quite similar. So not as much of a difference between Obama and Romney during the general election. And there's actually kind of, when we see, there's a lot of people at 2,000 donations, that huge difference came during the primary. So I guess what does that mean? Probably you need some kind of political expert or somebody who is familiar with the political landscape at the time to kind of really make sense of it. But that's something that is kind of worth exploring here. Okay, I gave you 2 answers already. Let me go ahead and give you your third view quiz answer. Our third view quiz answer today is the letter E. E as in elephant. E as in elephant. When we create data graphics, okay, what we are doing, all right, so we're going to get a little bit, we'll start to dissect some of these graphics. When we think about creating a data graphic, what we are doing is we are mapping, we are translating from data values like these numeric values or even categorical values, and we're mapping them to some kind of visual cue, some kind of graphical property, okay? And that graphical property could be something like where on the x-axis, where horizontally do we position something, or where do we position something vertically, okay? And so we can say, how big was the donation determines where on the x-axis. If it's a big donation, it's going to go on the right side. If it's a smaller donation, it goes on the left side, okay? And we can say how many goes to how tall, right? If there were lots of donations at that price point, we get a peak there, all right? If there weren't very many donations at a certain price point, it's, the line looks small. And that's kind of what these graphics show. But it can go not just the horizontal and vertical position, okay? That's what we have, but there's a whole bunch of other things that we can do, right? So we can create bars, and basically the length or the height of the bar can determine, how big a certain thing is, okay? We can even angle, depending on what it is that we're graphing, you can kind of angle some kind of thing. We can color a point, or we can change the shape. We can change the size of our points. So earlier on I showed you the graphic with our different vehicles, and I colored the points based on either what year was the vehicle or what was the trim line of the vehicle, and that's going to inform us something, okay? And we'll explore a lot of this in greater detail, but let's take a look at a few graphics here. Oh, I guess before I go on, there's a few things to keep in mind, okay? People are very good at judging from a distance a difference in height and a difference in lengths, okay? So you can look at, if one of these letters was just a little bit off position, a little bit out of line, your eyes are able to determine that very, very quickly, okay? You can kind of look at two things, right? It's very easy to see, this height and this height. This bar is taller than this bar is shorter than this bar. I mean, these ones are very obvious, but even these two things that are very similar, our eyes are able to kind of differentiate, kind of very easily, right? These two heights, these two green bars here, we can see, oh yeah, this one's taller and this one's shorter. Our eyes are able to detect that kind of difference very easily. But angles, okay? With a pie chart, okay, if you imagine a pie chart and you have something shading in at like 40% and another thing shading in at 35%, okay, it's very difficult to kind of tell those apart, especially if you have this versus this, and I say which one of these has a bigger angle, it's really hard to tell, okay? And I don't think they're exactly the same, but it's difficult to tell these kind of angles apart. So our eyes aren't very good at angles, okay? And our eyes aren't really great at distinguishing different shades if they're not next to each other, okay? So if you think about like what's the shade of this wall and the shade of that wall, okay? They might be the exact same color. They could also be slightly different, and it's really hard to know, okay? Like if they're next to each other, that's when you can kind of distinguish, but a lot of times you're gonna have different shades, different parts, and we're not really good at that kind of things. Obviously different colors, red, blue, green, yellow, yes, we can tell those apart. But different shades of red, different shades of blue, that's really hard, okay? When you graph things and you have a coordinate system, a lot of times we think of just X, Y, Cartesian coordinate, X in this direction, Y in this direction, but it doesn't always have to be, right? You can talk about graphing things on the globe, all right? And you've got, kind of this, longitude and latitude type of things. And, a lot of times when we picture a map in our head, it's a rectangle, but that gets messed up when you go towards the poles. When you go in Alaska or you go to Antarctica, the maps get messed up, right? So when you think about stuff, and you can have polar coordinates, and that messes things up. Your numeric axes, your numeric scales can be linear. I think we're very familiar with linear scales. But they can also be logarithmic, and logarithmic things are very useful when you have values of greatly different size, right? So if you're talking about like baseball player salaries, okay, you have certain players that make like $40 million a year, okay, and possibly more. And then you have other players that kind of make the league minimum, which I don't know is 500,000 or 700,000. 700,000, right? They just had the kind of the thing, right? And we go, 700,000, that's a lot of money. Everybody would be happy if their salary was 700,000, but that's quite a bit different. It's also only like, compare that to 40 million or something like that. That's like 2% or something, less than 2% of somebody making 40 million, right? So that's quite a bit different. There are categorical variables, and you can talk about, some categorical variables have no order. You think about like colors, and you have like red and orange and yellow, and those feel like there's an order there, but then, where do you put brown in the lineup? Where do you put pink? Where do you put black and white in the lineup? And now it's like, oh, okay, I'm not quite sure what order I should put these colors in. Where other categorical variables do have a natural order, right? Never, rarely, sometimes, always, or small, medium, large, extra large. There's a natural order there. But if I say, hey, put the states in order, I don't know, what does that even mean, right? Putting the states in order. You go alphabetical order, I guess, or what order you would join the union? I don't know. That's what order do you put in for the states, or is it by population, right? So certain things you don't have kind of an order, right? Time is a numeric variable, but it's weird, okay? Our calendar system measures time linearly from an arbitrary point, all right, of kind of religious significance, but we say, all right, this is how much time has passed, and we break it up into these things called years, and we break that up into these arbitrary units of time called months, which, it doesn't really make sense, but we've accepted it, right? And we've accepted, February has 28 cycles of the day, and July has 31, and why? I don't know, but that's just kind of how it goes. And we've kind of accepted that. And I mean, if you think to different societies and different civilizations, they all had their own kind of calendar system, okay? And it's really this miracle that the entire planet is using the same calendar system. But everything else, it's very arbitrary, okay? There's a lot of context in terms of making a graphic useful, right? Part of the graphic is to turn the data into something visual, but just as important is for the viewer to be able to go from the visual back to the graphic, back to the data. And to do that, you need to have guides. You need to have legends that say this color corresponds to this value, this, or you label your points, or you say these, this location corresponds to this value, and things like that. So anyway, we're gonna run out of time here, but you can try to convey different pieces of information on the same graphic. And you can have different layers. You can split the graphic into kind of different quadrants or different locations. And if you want to show changes over time, you can even consider using an animation. You can say this is what it looked like in the year 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, and so on and so forth. And this is what it looks like today. Okay, and we can take a look at that. Okay. Color, there's stuff like that. Okay. All right, here are just a few random graphics, and we won't have time to go over this. So just so do your reading here. This is average SAT math score 1994 to 1995, and it just lists off different states and what was the average SAT math score at that time. This is not very great. What is this trying to tell me? I don't know. New Hampshire had a high average SAT score in the year 1994 compared to the others, under 500. I don't know, right? It's not a great graphic. What you try to think, what is this trying to compel? What is this trying to tell me? I don't know if there's really anything here, okay? The order of the states is alphabetical, but why? Okay. Okay, well, anyway. There is some information that we can glean from it, okay? The height of the bar is linear, and the bottom started off at 200, 300, 400, 500. The difference between distance from 200 to 300 is the same distance as 400, 500. That's what a linear scale is. It kind of makes sense that the bottom is at kind of 200 because that is the lowest theoretic score you can get on the SAT math, but this is kind of average. Horizontally, we put the different states, and they are in alphabetical order. We could have arranged them in any order we wanted to, but again, what's a order of states that makes sense? And I don't know, right? I don't really know what order we should put them in. Okay, if you wanted to say, hey, we're going to put the states in order of, I don't know, education spending, right? This state spends more money on education. This state spends less on education. Maybe that could make sense, but you'd probably want to include that in there. That information isn't there. Okay. So anyway, that's like some information we can get out, but I don't know if this is a great graphic. Okay. These are other things. Here we differentiate the colors based on the gender. Okay. And this is race times, I think, for swimming the 100-meter freestyle in the Olympics and things like that. And what was what's the world record time? Not the Olympics, the world record time. And we can see, as time has gone on, the world record has only gone faster, which, of course, by definition, that must be the case. And we can see, there were times, where there wasn't much improvement, and then there were dips and things like that in the space. Well, anyway, we'll end here for now. Sorry for going a couple minutes over, but you can look over the rest of these slides. You can make sure you do your reading as well, and we will see you on Friday.